Hi everyone, it's Will with the Grand Duke Dmitri Diary series. It's the 10th of February here as I'm doing this, and we've got some sunlight today in the Portland area. You can see it streaming in a little bit there. And we are up to part 5 of the long diary entry of the 31st of March, 1921. So, and we're making progress. We're within at most 3, but I think 2 sections left of this diary. So it's nowhere as near as extensive. I think the one on the 15th went, maybe I had to break it down into something like 14 sections. And this time not. So what do we have for the recap? Well, just that Dmitri gave an interview to a reporter, editor/reporter who came from Poslednye Novosti to interview him, and it was his chance to set the record straight. So I went ahead. I think I mentioned in the last video that I was a little nervous about going to the Russian website that offers the digital copies of the old emigre newspapers. And I decided to go and do that. My research seemed to indicate that it was just that the message was just a caution against entering any personal information anywhere, but you don't have to do this, that on this website. You just have direct access. So I've been continuing to look through those. I haven't gotten very far yet, but fascinating stuff. So as soon as I come across something good, I will let you know. The ones that I'm looking at right now are just very, very focused on what's going on at Kronstadt and not talking about much else. Okay, so what else? In the recap, we have a reiteration of what a good friend and how supportive Maria is to her brother. And we have this pattern of continued self-reproach, this theme of, well, I should have done things differently, and now I am at fault for what the fallout is. So that's something that's really consistent throughout Dmitri's diaries, going all the way back to the first volume I have, which is 1906. Okay, our cast today, no new people, but a couple of significant people whom we've already met. Galeevsky, Dmitri's sort of self-proclaimed adjutant, and Coco Chanel. All right, here we go. Now I see with perfect clarity that when I was in Berlin, I should have heeded my inner voice and not under any circumstances have given my trip such a quasi-political character. But that would have caused a drama with Galeevsky, and it would have been such a bore. But now it's clear that it had to be done. I reached such a peak of nervousness and mental exhaustion that I made a firm decision to leave Paris, and thus bring an end to all talk of my plans of a political nature. At first, I thought I would go to London, but then I suddenly changed my plans and followed Coco's zealous urging to go with her to Menton or Monte Carlo and bake in the sun. Sorry, I was just a little distracted with my dog. Okay. And that's how I ended up on the Riviera. When I agreed to go with her, I somehow didn't think through all the details. She was so touching and sweet in her insistence that she was going on my behalf and it would be good for me there. But then, of course, I had a moral hangover because it's almost like being financially supported by her. But life is so short, and I still have some money, so I consented. And naturally, I can't pretend that my stay here on the Riviera has been unpleasant. The weather is splendid and the sun is wonderful. But the main thing is how pleasant it was to get out of Paris, where the atmosphere was so onerous. Here, of course, I am rather playing the ostrich because I don't think anyone knows I'm in Monte Carlo, but for the time being, no one has pestered me, and I haven't gotten any letters from Paris. All right. I'm sort of considering whether I should cut this short. My dog is not being particularly noisy, but is making some distracting, unpleasant noises in the background. I guess I'll go forward. I hope you will forgive me for that. So yeah, what to say about this? Well, one thing that I find interesting continuously so is how I've never had servants. I didn't grow up in a household that had servants, and I certainly have never had retainers. And it always interests me, going all the way back to Dmitri's childhood, to see how complicated that was, and how it wasn't just like you have your servants and your retainers and you tell them what to do and they're obsequious. It's more along the lines of you have to make sure that they are satisfied and happy, and it's complicated. And, I'm sure there were some people for whom it was just, you do what I say or go away. But for Dmitri, of course, to the extent that he took things to heart and to the extent that he did not like confrontation, it was complicated. So here he's saying that he knew exactly what he should have done in Berlin as far as stopping all the fanfare, but it would have, if he'd done that, it would have created a big drama with Golevsky, who wouldn't have been happy. So he didn't do it, but it's clear that he should have done it. Okay. Anyway, nervousness and mental exhaustion. To me, those two, his reaction seems just really almost wildly disproportionate to what was actually happening. And maybe I'm wrong about that, because he's certainly not providing all the details. He's not telling us, if other Russian emigres are turning up and yelling at him or whatever, or he's getting poison pen letters. If that's the case, he's not telling us that. But from what I can see, for instance, now in my admittedly fairly incomplete so far perusal of the actual emigre papers, it's not like anyone is saying, there's not a headline saying, oh, Dmitri is bad and he's a stupid person. That's not what you're waking up and reading in your latest copy of the Последние Новости. So this idea of nervousness and how does he put it? And mental exhaustion. It just seems like there's more going on there on the inside than on the outside. And that's really consistent with the way he's presenting himself to us in the diaries, that he just really internalizes this sense of guilt and self-reproach, and I should have done things differently. So I've been talking all along about this whole incident being a real turning point in Dmitri's life, and definitely it is. And this, he tells us that he wants to just withdraw completely from the scene and from any talk about political plans. He just wants to get away from that, and that's why he was thinking of going to London. But there my dog goes again, drinking. Yeah, the interest is still very strongly there. He's never going to lose that interest in politics. He's never going to lose that interest in wanting to be involved in politics. But I think this was a huge leap away from the idea of himself playing a leadership role. I think this is really him understanding that he's not cut out for that. And he'll sort of, by the 1930s, Crispin, don't know why I bother, he's actually deaf. By the 1930s, he'll be back, and he will have a leadership role in Young Russia, although not the leadership role. And he certainly will be, going back into having involvement in politics, but this is just really sort of the point of no return with the whole idea of him ever being, in any form, the ruler in Russia or sort of the central figure in a movement. Yeah. And this whole idea of I need to have a dynastic marriage is falling by the wayside as well. Okay, so the trip with Coco is something that he does on impulse. I mean, she must have, I don't know what kind of person she was, but she must have been, you know, a kind person at some level, or a person who could look at the suffering of another person and say, well, I can do something about this. I can help. Yeah, I don't know if they had a wild animal attraction to each other, or what the sort of main cornerstone of their relationship was. But in this instance, anyway, she seems to be behaving, you know, relatively selflessly. But, you know, Dmitri says that he's doing it on impulse. He's doing it without thinking it through. And already, while he's still in Monte Carlo, the pattern of self-reproach is reemerging. Well, you know, basically he's saying he's worried about the indignity of more or less being a kept man. He has some money, so that's good. He still has some money from what he was able to raise through loans and through Sasha Polovtsov. So that makes things a little better. But also this idea that he's playing the ostrich, as he puts it. He's burying his head in the sand, not so much in the sense of politically, but that he's hiding away. He's not sort of, he's not sort of doing what I and so many other people are doing in the U.S. right now, and just saying, I don't want to hear any news. I don't want to, you know, don't talk politics with me. Yes, I've been interested in politics all my life, but now don't bring the subject up. Yeah, he's not doing that. But he's doing it in respect to his personal life. He's gone off. He's embarrassed by this whole sort of kept man idea, and he doesn't want any contact with the people back in Paris. So, yeah, he definitely preferred Monte Carlo to any other place in the Riviera. He never cared much for Menton or Cannes or Nice or, Antibes, any of the other places. He always liked Monte Carlo the best. For what that's worth, if any of you are in the French Riviera and you're wondering about that, that was something that was very consistent through everything he wrote about the south of France. And I'll end it with his crisis, with him saying life is so short. He's reproaching himself about going off with Carlo, but life is so short. And he's right. And he was even, in his own case, he was even more right than he knew, because, of course, he was turning 30, and he would die when he was 50. So his life would be very short. Okay, so next time, interestingly, we are going to return not to political activity on his part, of course, but to his interest in what's going on politically and in contemporary events. So he's going to be talking about this big crisis with Wrangel, with General Wrangel, who still had more or less the management of his troops on his hand, and France decided to withdraw its support. And what to do with these thousands of men, this whole crisis situation. They were mostly being expelled from Constantinople as the Soviet government came more and more to be recognized as a legitimate one. It was starting to exert pressure and with respect to these white Russian refugees, and telling the other countries that, if you want to have any dealings with us at all, any trade dealings or anything else, you need to deal with these white Russians in a harsh way. So there's a lot about that in this book, which, as always, I continue to recommend. And yeah, okay, we're at the 15-minute mark, and even though the next video will not be diving immediately into life with Coco, they're always well worth well, the sections of the diaries are well worth familiarizing yourself with if you want to understand Dmitri at all. And plus, from a historical perspective, they're just plain interesting about what's going on and what his perspective is on what's going on. And I'm rambling, so I will see you next time. Bye.